Welcome to another episode of The Tea with your hosts Splash and Shama, where we share true crime stories from the Moonshala studio.
How would you feel if a family member abruptly died and it was reported that they died of a drug overdose that you had no idea that they had and it wasn't being investigated?
Well, that is exactly what is going on right now with the family of Breana Noojin Nix. And we had the pleasure of sitting down with Brittany Noojin, who's Breana's sister, for an exclusive interview. Breana's family has been working so hard to get her story in the public's eye and needs your help in getting justice for Breana.
Man, I'm telling you, there's so many families dealing with the same thing that we are.
So let's dive in. Breana Noojin Nix was 32 years old, living in Hayden, Alabama. So Hayden, Alabama is a tiny, tiny town. It only has approximately 1,300 people, and it's located in Blount County, which has an overall population of approximately 60,000 people. So it's the type of place where everyone knows everyone, or at least everyone's business. Breana was a night nurse. She worked from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., and her family describes her as being smart, driven, super sweet, very shy, with the silliest personality. Like, she's just hilarious. Breana was a giver, a caretaker, and loved serving other people. She had stressors in her life, like we all do, of course, and had a husband who worked odd jobs to make money, but Breana really was the main provider. Breana and Steven had been married for just over 9 years.
Breana and Steven, they got together in 2008 and ended up getting married 2011. That was her first boyfriend that she ever had. So we never really liked Steven, but we were happy that she was happy, and we tolerated him because we loved Breana and we were happy for her. But none of our family has ever liked him. And even before she got with him, we all went to the same school together. So I knew who he was when I was growing up, and I really didn't even like him when I was a kid. But once Breana got with him, I just tolerated him.
So let's talk a little bit about Steven Nix. He wasn't a very well-liked guy. He liked to brag about himself, one-upping everyone, and had a story for everything. Steven really wasn't one to come around Breana's family unless they were giving him money, but they didn't really entertain his narcissistic personality. But Breana herself did have a very close relationship with her family.
The only time that he would come around to family dinners or family events, it was when he knew that he was getting money. So he would come for his birthday and Christmas. Any other time, it was always just Breana by herself. He would always have some stupid excuse, like he was working on a lawnmower or something, just some stupid excuse to not ever come to any family stuff unless he knew that he was getting money from my parents.
That's definitely interesting that we're told that he didn't come around the family. I mean, you've been married for 9 years. You would think that you would do some types of family vacations, even small fishing trips, especially being in Alabama. Maybe football games or something that they had in common. But to never come around except for when you're getting money or that's perceived vision of why you would come around, not a good look to begin with.
Well, it doesn't sound like the family liked him all that much anyways, and if they were just tolerating him, and not entertaining his ego, of course he doesn't want to come around. He wants to be around people where he gets to be the center of attention and talk, and everyone wants to listen to his stupid stories and his one-uppers, and most people don't like that kind of conversation. They don't want anything to do with him. Breana was extremely close to her sister Brittany. She is 2.5 years younger than Breana, and Breana and Brittany actually lived really close to each other after Brittany had relocated to Hayden, Alabama, so that they could spend more time together, and they hung out almost daily.
He has one sister, and she has actually been telling people that Breana's family never cared about her or never, did anything with her or did anything for her, which is obviously, total BS because we're putting her whole story out here for everybody to see. Steven wanted everybody to think that Breana overdosed, and Breana didn't do drugs. So it made my whole family mad to, him going around telling everybody that Breana killed herself or overdosed on fentanyl was shooting up. And everybody that knew her knows that Breana didn't do that. Everybody knows that she would never touch drugs. She was extremely smart. She worked at a rehab, and she would never want to be or to live that kind of lifestyle.
Breana had no history of drug or alcohol abuse and was really a good girl overall.
You would think that when someone's using drugs, you would have an idea. We've had family members that have been unfortunately addicted to things, and at this time there's signs that you would see. And if you're around this person, especially her coworkers, none of her coworkers had seen anything, and she's a nurse, you would imagine that someone would see something, a slight conversation, a slip of something, but there's no evidence at all that she was using drugs.
And with no history of abuse, you wouldn't think she would go straight to shooting up fentanyl all over her body.
With an 18-gauge needle?
Right. And there was no marijuana in her toxicology report. So who goes from doing absolutely nothing to shooting up fentanyl? It makes no sense.
Nobody.
Exactly. And she was prescribed to some pain medication in the past, years before she passed away. When she was having pancreatic problems, she actually had to get hospitalized for it because she was in so much pain. And they sent her home with some pain pills, and she couldn't tolerate it. She would get sick. She would get headaches. It would make her real nauseous. And she couldn't even tolerate one pain pill. So I don't see how she could go from not even being able to tolerate something that isn't near as strong as fentanyl to actually shooting up fentanyl.
Ironically, Stephen himself was known to have a drug addiction.
I mean, yeah, he was purchasing amphetamines off the street, and Breana would have to keep her medicine on her at all times because he would steal it from her.
The family has never received Breana's autopsy report, but they did receive the toxicology report.
Yes, that is the only thing that we did receive. The DA told us that the fentanyl levels were therapeutic, but she was also prescribed to ADHD medication and antidepressants. So they said that the combination of all three was fatal. And they also said that her amphetamine levels were extremely high, which is weird because the original investigator counted her prescriptions and they were all perfect to date. None of them were abused. So I don't understand how her amphetamine levels could have been so high if none of them were abused. However, he would purchase amphetamines off the street. So I know that he had access to them. And they never tested the syringe that she was supposedly shooting up with. So there could have been amphetamine in that syringe as well.
In the months leading up to Breana's death, nothing appeared different about her. There were no signs of any secret drug addiction, or really not even any signs of marital issues between her and Stephen.
Not at all. She never talked about Stephen to anyone, not even her friends or family, because she knew that nobody really liked Stephen. So she wasn't going to make it worse. When she would come around and he was around, it would make her feel awkward if, she told me something that was really bad, knowing that I hated him. So she would just keep to herself about anything that she was going through with him. But he would talk bad about her, in front of my family. He would come over and help me hang stuff up on the walls when we first moved to Hayden. And he would be over there without her. And all he would do is just talk so bad about her. And Breana never said anything about him. She did tell me a few years before she died that she felt stuck and she was wanting to get away from him. And I tried to convince her to come move in with me. I knew a lot of people at the hospital where I lived, and she never would, but I really do wish she would have.
There is speculation that Stephen was having an affair or affairs, and shortly after the passing of Breana, he did move in his girlfriend at the time. And I am going to call her his girlfriend.
Well, she never told me, but after she died and his family started being really ugly to us, making really ugly posts on Facebook, people started coming out and talking and telling me about affairs that he did have. And one female was even posting pictures of her and him to her Facebook page. And I mean, this is while him and Breana were still married and Breana was still alive. She even shared her obituary, but she's taken all of that down now. That's not the same female that's living with them.
Let me tell you something else interesting about Stephen. He was texting Brittany, who's Brianna's younger sister, about sex toys and sex swings.
That is what he sent me just a few days after my sister died. I'm, grieving, crying, upset, and trying to talk to him about it. And that was his response to me. And that's just how he is. Nobody likes him. Everybody thinks he's a pervert. He loves to brag about himself. He talks way too much. I mean, that's just how he is. Nobody likes him.
On March 2nd, 2020, Breana passed away. Let's hear from Brittany on how this day transpired.
She worked that night from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. and she got home around 8 a.m. I was at work and he called me right at 12:23 and he said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I said, I'm at work. I just ate lunch. What are you doing? And he said, "Well, you need to get over here. Your sister's done tried to kill herself." And he said it just like that. So I thought he was joking at first. And I asked him, "Are you serious?" And he said, "Yeah, why would I joke about something like this?" So I drop everything I'm doing, go straight to her house. I'm running red lights. I'm just trying to get there as soon as I can. And when I get there, he's sitting in the living room and he has his parents on both sides of him. And I walk up to him and I said, "What happened?" And both of his parents are crying. There's tears rolling down their face. And he's just sitting there calm. I mean, he seemed like he was kind of nervous, but he didn't seem upset. And I asked him what happened. And he said, "I don't know. I was standing outside and I heard a thump, but I thought maybe she dropped her cell phone and didn't think anything of it. I went to the bank in the dump and I was gone for about an hour. And whenever I came back, I noticed that she was in the bathroom with the door shut, but there was a light on." And he said, "I tried to open the door, but it was locked. So I unlocked it with my fingernail and then tried to open the door, but she was laid in front of it. So I had to shove it open and shove her out of the way to get in there." And he said that he saw that she was unresponsive and blue. So he called 911 and they got there in about 2 minutes. And he said that he about passed out from working on her, doing compressions on her. And then at 12:54, they pronounced her dead. And one of the officers took Breana's mother-in-law outside and told her, and I was watching out the window. So I knew that it wasn't good when I saw her head drop and she started crying. And she came in and told us that she didn't make it. And it took, I know you asked me the other day, or it might not have been you. I've talked to so many people, but it took about 3 hours for them to take her out after they pronounced her dead. But during that time, the lead investigator found Breana's cell phone and came into the kitchen where Stephen was standing and asked him what the passcode to her phone was. And he was pretending like he didn't know what the code was. So I gave it to him and I was standing right behind him when they opened it up. And it was in the middle of some goofy Facebook video that she had been watching. So they exited out of that. And the first thing I noticed was she had a notification from a missed call at 7:53 a.m., which is weird because they found her phone around 1 o'clock. So that notification was still on her phone, like she had never checked it. So I feel like she probably was attacked as soon as she walked in the door that day. But they asked Stephen, "What time did she get home this morning?" And he said, "I don't know. I was asleep." And they said, "Well, she has a missed call from you at 7:53. And he said, "Oh, well, I must have woke up and called her and went back to sleep, but I forgot about that." And so they asked him to write a statement, and he was, I mean, this was just minutes after they pronounced her dead. And it was like, he was so nervous when I first got there. But then as soon as they pronounced her dead, it was like he felt relief, and he was laughing and joking and back to his normal self. They asked him to write a statement, and he said, "Oh, you won't be able to read my handwriting." I went to Hayden and was laughing about it. And I was standing right there. So I said, I'll write the statement for you. And he said that he was gone for about 30 minutes, came home and found her unresponsive and called 911. That's all that he put in the statement.
I'm curious of what Brittany's gut's telling her. You know, you wake up and you think the day is going to be normal, but knowing that, finding this out, what does her gut tell her right now? The initial instinct of what happened that morning.
I know. I'm really curious too with, everything she's doing to bring Breana justice. I'm really curious too. What is her gut instinct? What is her gut telling her versus what does she think happened, or what, how did that day transpire?
Well, I know that they were arguing through text that night. He was accusing her of having an affair, which she wasn't. He was the one that was cheating. So I feel like maybe they were already fighting and it escalated because the condition that her body was in, it looked like, she really put up a fight. But I feel like she was wanting to leave him, and he knew that if she left him, he wouldn't have any income. And he also knew that if she were dead, he would get 2 years worth of salary from her life insurance. So, I mean, I honestly, my heart told me that day when he called me that he did this to her.
Is it possible that Stephen committed this crime and had help doing so?
Judging from the pictures that I have of her body, it does look like someone may have held her down while someone else injected her. And then Stephen didn't have fingernails, but on the side of her right knee, it looked like it looked perfectly matched up with fingernail scratches on the right side of her knee. And Stephen didn't have fingernails, and it would be impossible to make a perfect straight line going down on yourself with your own fingernails. So I feel like someone else could have been involved, but I don't know. I know that she was cold when the first responders got there. So I think that he waited until she was gone, until he even called 911. I also know that his uncle and his parents were both there before the first responders got there. So,
as you heard, Stephen called 911 at 12:12 p.m. Paramedics arrived at 12:14 p.m. It took them just 2 minutes to arrive on scene. While paramedics were doing compressions on Breana and trying to save her life, Stephen was climbing around paramedics to get to the bathroom trash to take it out. No one has ever heard what he was trying to get out of the bathroom. When paramedics arrived on scene, Stephen's parents and his uncle, who was a police officer for the sheriff's department, were already on scene before paramedics arrived. How did they get there first if Stephen called 911 right away upon finding Breana?
I have no idea, because they lived 10 minutes from his house. And then his uncle was working in Aniana that day and was 30 minutes away. So that means he waited 30 minutes for his uncle to get there before he even called 911. But he has his uncle that works for the sheriff's department. He wasn't assigned to it. He was there working the scene, and he was not even on the time of arrival sheet with all of the other first responders, but he was in uniform. So, if he was patrolling the dam that day, I don't know why he would leave the dam unattended to go to a call that he wasn't even called to.
The investigation to date has not been handled appropriately. Law enforcement immediately ruled it an overdose and have failed to protect the evidence or even look into the suspicions the family has continued to bring forward over the last 2 years. And the DA, she has been horrible and just completely turning a blind eye.
The original investigator that was on the case, she has been removed from the case in the sheriff's department, but she texted me on March 16th, which was 2 weeks after Breana died, and she was telling me that she still had to check his alibi. So 2 weeks after Breana died, they still hadn't checked with the dump or anything. They still haven't questioned any of the neighbors, and it's been 2 years now. They have not done anything. They haven't contacted the DEA. They haven't questioned the neighbors, brought him in for questioning. They haven't done anything. And then I asked the DA, do we have enough to subpoena his phone records? And she responded, I have the power to subpoena your phone records if I wanted to. That was her answer to me.
The autopsy report has still not been released to Brianna's family. However, it was given to Stephen, and he was allowed to collect on the $160,000 life insurance policy. What's in that report that is being hidden from her family?
I have no idea. I know that in Alabama, there is a 2-year statute of limitations on a wrongful death lawsuit. And I honestly feel like that's why they're waiting for so long. They have already told us that it won't even go to grand jury until after February of this year. So, they're telling us that she did this to herself. We need to accept the fact that she did this to herself, but they won't close the case, and they still plan on taking it to grand jury. If they're not looking for an indictment, why are they going to take it to grand jury? And if they're so convinced that Breana did this to herself, why won't they close the case? We can't get those answers from them. Without the autopsy and the investigation being open, we can't even find a lawyer here in Alabama that wants to help us. I've probably contacted hundreds of lawyers, and they all tell me with the criminal investigation going on, there's nothing we can do. So I would love to be able to, get this story out to where maybe we could find a lawyer that would help us. We need maybe somebody that is new and wants a name for themselves. Something.
Brianna's wounds all looked fresh. It didn't look like they were wounds of someone struggling with an ongoing drug addiction. She had horrific bruising nearly all over her body. It did not appear that a person injecting drugs had done this to herself, but of someone who was possibly held down, attacked, and injected. The wounds on her hands, there were such huge bruises. It looked more like somebody had been kneeling on her hands to hold her down. The bruising on her feet looked more like somebody had grabbed onto her and had to drag her or hold her down.
No, I agree with you, Shama, on this 100%. These wounds are not indicative of a person who's going to self-harm themselves. Especially with Breana being a nurse. She knows what gauge of needles to use. She knows where they can be. She worked with people who tried to, who were committing suicide, who were drug addicts. So she's seen them firsthand where she works at.
Yes, and they didn't look like normal track marks. It looked like someone with no experience did this, and Breana had 12 years of experience. It did not make any sense to me. And with them all being fresh, they all appear to have been made that day within those 4 hours. So if you're shooting up fentanyl, you're not going to be able to inject it that many times. You're going to be passed out after the first injection. And I had just seen her 2 weeks prior to her death in shorts, a tank top, and flip-flops, and she had nothing on her. So within 2 weeks, we counted 87 marks, but the original investigator told us that there were over 100 marks on her body. So within 2 weeks, she put over 100 injections in herself. The first thing that I noticed when I went to the funeral home that day to see her body, the first mark that I noticed was 2 or 3 injection sites on the back of her right elbow. She was right-handed, and that's exactly what I said to the funeral director. I said, how did she do this? She's right-handed. And that's when she started showing me everything else. And I was told by Stephen that it was just that one mark on her arm and a little bit of blood in the sink. But after seeing her, I was just in disbelief. After seeing her, I knew 100% she did not do this to herself. And then the funeral director told me that her whole back was covered. So, the back of her legs, everything. How are you going to inject in your back? Anybody that has seen those pictures will tell you that her palms, on her palms, that is defense wounds.
Over the last 2 years, Brianna's family has been doing everything they possibly can to get this case in the public eye. It's a case that has had absolutely no news coverage, and they just want to get the DA to complete a thorough investigation and get answers. But how's Stephen been since Breana died? I think that's a really big question.
There for a couple of weeks, he was coming to my house just about every day. And now that I think about it, it was probably for him to see, how we were acting and, what we were saying about everything. I think he was just really wanting to see how we felt about everything. But now he will not speak to us. I mean, my dad has contacted him. He called him in the summer of 2020, asking if he could get a copy of the death certificate. And Stephen told him, well, I'll have to check with my attorney and get back to you. And of course, he never got back to my dad. And then not long ago, my dad texted him asking if he would share the autopsy report with us, and never heard back from him. But no, he will not speak to us at all. According to the original investigator, she told me that Stephen does have the autopsy report, and she was going to try and get in touch with him and get him to send it to her so she could send it to us. But that didn't happen.
This story is just so heart-wrenching. To know that deep down in your soul, everything seems off and no one will take the time to do a proper investigation is unjust. Time is running out. In March of this year, it will be 2 years, and as you heard from Brittany, there is a statute of limitation on wrongful death cases. Is this a case of protecting a family who is tied to a small-town law enforcement? We're not sure, but we need your help in sharing this case, spreading the word, and helping with a call of action to bring justice for Breana Noojin Nix. We will have links to their GoFundMe page, a petition you can go out and sign, and also to a private Facebook group where you can follow along as this case blows wide open.
The GoFundMe is perfect just because if we do need a second autopsy performed, which I strongly think that we do, just because they didn't test her hair or urine, which would prove, if she had been using or not, that's going to cost around $25,000 to $30,000 just to do that. We've had to pay nearly $10,000 just to hire our own private investigator, and legal fees. Just sharing the petition to release the autopsy report would help. Just getting her story out there, and hopefully it'll reach someone that can help us. If we could get enough publicity on this, I know the DA is all about appearance. She only puts things on Facebook that tries to make her look good. But if you ever have to meet with her, she is awful. She is so rude and condescending, and she's a smart aleck. I mean, she's horrible. And I know that she would not like that kind of publicity, being shown on her county. So
let's get justice for Breana. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of The Tea.